Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. Jackson Moyo, a young entrepreneur facing ruin, makes a desperate pact with a mysterious group known as the Circle. Promised wealth and success, Jackson soon realizes that the cost of his newfound power is much darker than he imagined. As his sister Kara becomes entangled in the sinister consequences, they are thrust into a battle against the rising darkness. Together, they journey through trials of strength, truth, and sacrifice to protect the Heartstone, a powerful artifact that could end the Circle's reign of terror forever. Will Jackson and Kara's bond be enough to conquer the shadows, or will they pay the ultimate price for power? Jackson Moyo stared out of the tall glass window, watching the bustling streets of Abuja. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city, but his world felt darker than ever. His startup, which he had built from scratch, was collapsing. He had spent the last of his savings trying to keep it afloat, but it was no use. The creditors were circling like vultures, waiting to strip him of everything he had left. His office, once full of energy and hope, was now cold and empty. The desks where his employees once sat were bare, and the sound of silence was deafening. His phone buzzed on his desk, a reminder that yet another bill was overdue. His dream of success was slipping through his fingers like sand, and he was powerless to stop it. Jackson sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. How had everything gone so wrong? He had always been smart, driven, and resourceful. Yet, here he was, on the brink of losing everything. The thought of failure gnawed at his mind. He couldn't bear the shame of going back to his family with nothing to show for all his hard work. A sudden knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He hadn't expected anyone. Who could it be? Hesitantly, Jackson opened the door. Standing before him was a tall, mysterious man dressed in a sleek black suit. His face was calm, almost too calm, with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through Jackson's soul. He carried an air of power, like someone who knew more than he let on. "Mr. Moyo," the man said, his voice smooth and deliberate. "I believe you're looking for a solution to your predicament." Jackson's heart raced. Who was this man? How did he know about his troubles? "I don't know what you're talking about," Jackson replied, trying to sound composed, though his nerves betrayed him. The man smiled, a chilling smile that sent a shiver down Jackson's spine. "Oh, but I think you do. You're at the edge, ready to fall. But what if I told you there's a way to rise again? A way to not just survive, but thrive?" Jackson's skepticism rose. "Who are you? My name isn't important. What is important is the opportunity I'm offering you. An invitation to join a powerful group known as the Circle." The Circle. Jackson's brow furrowed. What kind of group is this? The man's smile widened. "A group that can give you everything you've ever wanted. Wealth, influence, success beyond your wildest dreams. All we ask in return is for you to give up the one thing that holds you back." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. This offer sounded too good to be true, but desperation clouded his judgment. What exactly does that mean? What would I have to give up? The man's eyes gleamed with a sinister light. "That's something you'll discover in time. All you need to do is sign." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, crisp piece of paper and a pen. Jackson stared at it, his hand trembling. Was he really going to do this? Was he willing to sell his soul for a second chance at success? For a moment, he thought of Kara, his fiancée, longtime girlfriend and fiancée. She had always been his rock, the one person who believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. But now, he was in too deep. He couldn't turn back. He had to do this. He had to. With one final deep breath, Jackson signed the paper. The man took the paper, slipping it back into his coat pocket. Congratulations, Mr. Moyo. Your new life begins now. You'll be hearing from us soon. Without another word, the man turned and left, leaving Jackson standing alone in his office, his hands still shaking from what he had just done. He didn't know what he had agreed to, but it felt like he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As the door clicked shut, a cold feeling crept into the room. Jackson's decision had set something in motion, something dark, something dangerous. And though he didn't know it yet, the price of his new life would be more than he could ever imagine. Jackson stared at the closed door for a long time, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. What had he just done? Had he made the biggest mistake of his life? Only time would tell, but deep down, Jackson had a sinking feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The shadows outside grew longer, and the darkness inside him deepened. He had made a pact, and now, the real cost was about to reveal itself. The heat was unbearable. Jackson woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. His apartment, usually cool and comfortable, felt like an oven. The air was thick and stifling, sticking to his skin like a hot, damp cloth. He fumbled for the air conditioning remote, but no matter how low he set the temperature, the oppressive heat wouldn't budge. It was as though the very atmosphere around him had changed, suffocating him from the inside. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he answered it without checking the caller. Hello. Congratulations, Mr. Moyo, came the same smooth voice from the night before, the man from the circle. As promised, your fortunes have already begun to shift. Jackson sat up, the sheets clinging to his damp skin. What do you mean? Check your bank account. His hands trembling, Jackson opened his banking app. His eyes widened in shock. The debts that had been suffocating him, gone. Replaced by a balance that was far more than he had ever seen in his life. How? Consider this the beginning of our arrangement, the voice replied. But remember, every gift comes with a cost. Before Jackson could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the screen in disbelief. The money was real, and it was all his. The overwhelming relief he had expected didn't come. Instead, a gnawing sensation of unease settled in his stomach. The heat pressed down on him harder, as if the air itself was punishing him for his newfound wealth. Jackson got out of bed and walked to the window. The city of Abuja shimmered under the harsh morning sun. The streets below buzzed with life, but something felt off. The usual vibrant energy of the city was replaced by a heavy, unsettling stillness. A knock on his door made him jump. He hadn't expected anyone, and after last night's encounter, he wasn't eager to see another stranger at his door. With hesitant steps, he approached the door and opened it slightly. It was Kara. She stood there, looking the same as always, but there was something different about her, a dullness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was sweating profusely, her face flushed as if she'd been walking through an open furnace. Jackson, do you feel that? It's like the city's on fire. He nodded slowly, his throat dry. Yeah, something's wrong. Kara stepped inside, wiping her forehead. I came to check on you. I've been having weird dreams all night, and I woke up feeling off. Jackson's stomach turned. He knew it wasn't just a coincidence. This was the beginning of the cost. The circle had promised him wealth, and they had delivered. But the price was already starting to show. Kara, his beloved fiancée, was feeling the effects. He tried to shake off the guilt, convincing himself that it was just the heat. It's probably just the weather. This heatwave is messing with everyone. But deep down, Jackson knew it was more than just the weather. As the days passed, the heat worsened. Temperatures soared to record highs across Abuja. People were collapsing from heat exhaustion, and the once bustling streets were now eerily quiet. The heat seemed to follow Jackson everywhere, clinging to him like a shadow. Even his office, with its state-of-the-art air conditioning, couldn't escape the unbearable warmth. His new fortune brought luxury, but no amount of money could cool the relentless fire that seemed to consume everything around him. Kara, too, was changing. She was growing weaker by the day. Her once bright smile had faded, replaced by a tired, vacant look. Her energy drained, and she struggled to keep up with her usual routine. Jackson watched helplessly as his fiancée, the one person who had always stood by him, began to unravel before his eyes. The guilt gnawed at him, but he buried it deep, telling himself it was all just a coincidence. But at night, when the heat was at its worst, and the air felt thick with something sinister, Jackson couldn't escape the truth. He had made a pact with the circle, and now the consequences were unfolding. Kara's life was slipping away, and the horrific price of his deal was becoming clear. And the heat, always the heat, seemed to grow more intense with every passing moment. The next morning, the air felt charged with an electric energy that made Jackson uneasy. He could almost hear the whispers, the voices of the circle echoing in his mind, urging him to push forward, to embrace his newfound power. But the weight of his decision hung heavy over him, casting a long shadow on his thoughts. Kara had gone home after their conversation, but Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see her pale face, the weariness etched in her features. It was as if the very life was being drained from her, and he was powerless to stop it. He decided to call her, needing to hear her voice, to reassure himself that she was okay. As he dialed, he felt a strange shiver run down his spine, as if someone was watching him. The room grew dimmer, the shadows lengthening, twisting into strange shapes that danced at the corners of his vision. "Hey, Jackson," Kara answered, her voice faint. "Kara, how are you?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light, but the worry seeped through. "I don't know, Jax. I still feel weird. It's like something is changing inside me," she replied, her voice trembling. "Just rest. I'll come over later," he said, trying to sound comforting, but inside, he was terrified. After hanging up, Jackson paced his apartment, feeling the walls closing in. He had to do something, anything, to help her. That's when he remembered the strange book he had found at the dusty old bookstore. It was filled with symbols and incantations, promises of power and transformation. Could it be the answer? Could it hold the key to breaking the curse that seemed to be tightening around Kara? The idea sparked a flame of desperation within him, pushing him to act. He grabbed the book and flipped through its pages, searching for anything that might help. The air around him crackled, and he could feel the magic swirling, urging him to delve deeper. He found a passage that promised to harness energy and help from the universe, if he could perform the ritual correctly. With a growing sense of purpose, he gathered the materials he needed: candles, herbs, and an animal sacrifice. The thought of harming an innocent creature made his stomach churn, but he was running out of options. He had to save Kara, no matter the cost. As night fell, he set up a small altar in his living room, heart racing with anticipation. The darkness enveloped him, making the room feel like a different world. He lit the candles, their flames flickering like whispers of hope. As he began the incantation, the air thickened around him, and a low hum resonated in his ears. Shadows flickered and swirled, and he could sense an unseen presence joining him in the room. The feeling was both exhilarating and terrifying. Suddenly, the power surged through him, and the candles flickered violently. He grasped the animal, a small rabbit, and held it over the altar. Just as he was about to make the sacrifice, a vision flashed before his eyes, Kara, alone in her room, darkness enveloping her like a shroud. "No," he shouted, dropping the rabbit. "I won't do this." But the energy had already been unleashed. The room trembled, and a chilling wind swept through, extinguishing the candles. The shadows seemed to writhe with life, whispering secrets of power and betrayal. Jackson felt their weight pressing down on him, binding him in a web of darkness. He stumbled backward, realizing too late the price he had just paid. The bond he thought he could control was now a chain, dragging him deeper into the circle's grip. He had awakened something he couldn't unsee, something dark and hungry. The next day, Jackson awoke with a start. His heart raced as he recalled the ritual. Had it worked? Was Kara safe? He rushed to his phone, dialing her number with shaking hands. "Jackson," she answered, sounding even weaker than before. "Are you okay?" he pressed, dread settling in his stomach. "Not really. I keep having these dreams, strange things happening, and I feel like I'm losing control," she said, her voice a whisper. "What do you mean?" He could barely contain his fear. "It's like there's something inside me, something dark. I can feel it clawing at my mind." His blood ran cold. "What do you want me to do?" "Just be here for me. Please." Jackson ended the call, feeling a surge of guilt. He had tried to take control, to bend dark magic to his will, but instead, he had opened a door he could not close. The heat from the night before still lingered in his veins, a constant reminder of the bargain he had struck. He spent the day in a daze, unable to concentrate on anything. The once vibrant colors of Abuja felt muted and grim. Shadows danced in his peripheral vision, and he could hear the whispers of the circle in the back of his mind, promising him more power if he was willing to pay the price. By evening, he couldn't resist any longer. He returned to the book, flipping through its pages until he found another incantation, one that promised to enhance his influence and solidify his bond with the circle. But as he read, a sense of foreboding washed over him. "Are you sure you want this?" a voice echoed in his mind. It sounded like Kara, but it was laced with darkness. Ignoring the warning, he prepared for the ritual once again. The room darkened as he lit the candles, and the atmosphere grew heavy. He could feel the presence gathering, an unseen force that wanted to be released. But as he began to chant, he felt a pull in his chest. The darkness inside him stirred, angry and restless. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, and the shadows twisted and coiled around him. He staggered back, realizing he had lost control. The energy surged, and he felt it racing towards Kara, who was now the unwitting target of his greed. Images flashed before him, Kara's face, twisted in pain, her body contorting as the dark magic wrapped around her. "No," he shouted, but it was too late. The darkness had already taken hold. He rushed to her apartment, fear gripping his heart. As he burst through the door, he found Kara on the floor, her body trembling and contorted. The air was thick with a malevolent energy, the shadows swirling like smoke around her. "Kara," he cried, rushing to her side. "Jackson," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Help me." Jackson knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry. I thought I could save you." But as he held her, he felt the power of the circle surge within him, and the shadows began to tighten their grip on Kara. She screamed, a sound that pierced his heart, but he was frozen, caught in the web of magic he had unleashed. In that moment, Jackson realized the truth: he had become the very thing he feared. The cost of power was far greater than he had ever imagined, and the price was no longer just his own. The night was dark and suffocating as Jackson held Kara, the shadows swirling ominously around them. Her breath came in shallow gusts, and he could see the flicker of life fading from her eyes. The darkness that had invaded her was consuming her spirit, and he felt utterly helpless. "No," he shouted, shaking her gently. "You can fight this. I'll find a way to help you." As he looked around the room, the shadows coalesced into shapes, figures lurking just beyond the candlelight. Jackson's heart raced as he recognized them. They were the members of the circle, their faces obscured, but their presence unmistakably sinister. One stepped forward, a figure draped in dark robes, their voice smooth and menacing. "You've done well, Jackson. Your commitment to our cause is commendable. Get away from her." Jackson screamed, feeling an instinctive surge of defiance. "You misunderstand," the figure said, tilting its head. "Kara is not a victim, she is a vessel. Your sacrifice has made her even more powerful." Jackson's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "She's my fiancée. I won't let you take her." "But you already have," the figure replied, a smirk playing on its lips. "The darkness you invoked has bound her to us. She is part of the circle now." Kara's body convulsed violently, and Jackson felt a rush of panic. "Kara, fight it. You're stronger than this." The shadows pressed closer, whispering dark promises of power and wealth. Jackson's heart raced, torn between saving Kara and succumbing to the lure of the circle's influence. In that moment of desperation, he reached for the book, desperate to find a way to reverse the curse. As he flipped through the pages, a passage caught his eye, a counter-ritual that claimed to sever the bond between the chosen and the circle. But it came with a terrible price. "Only through sacrifice can the connection be broken," he read aloud, his voice trembling. "One must willingly give up their power, their life force, to save the other." Kara's eyes flickered with recognition, and she reached for him, her voice a fragile whisper. "No, Jackson, don't do it." He looked into her eyes, filled with love and fear. "I won't let them take you. I'll do whatever it takes." The figure laughed softly, its voice dripping with contempt. "Foolish boy. You think you can save her? You'll only bind yourself to us." With a surge of determination, Jackson began the counter-ritual. The shadows recoiled, their whispers turning into shrieks as the energy swirled around him. The room trembled as he chanted, feeling the power drain from him. Kara writhed in agony, and the darkness surrounding her thickened, threatening to pull her into the abyss. "No," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Jackson could feel his life force ebbing, the shadows reaching for him as they howled in anger. But he pushed forward, his voice rising in strength as he called out for the bond to be severed. With a final surge of will, the energy exploded, a blinding light illuminating the room. The shadows shrieked, their forms dissipating like smoke in the wind. Jackson felt a profound emptiness, a void where his power once resided. And then, silence. As the light faded, Jackson collapsed to the floor, panting heavily. The room felt strangely empty, devoid of the darkness that had consumed it moments before. He turned to Kara, who lay still on the ground, her body limp and pale. "Kara," he shouted, scrambling to her side. "Please, wake up." He cradled her head in his arms, heart racing as he checked for signs of life. Her breath was shallow, but she was alive. Relief flooded through him, mixed with the sorrow of what he had lost. The darkness that had bound them was broken, but at what cost? Kara slowly opened her eyes, confusion and fear etched on her face. "Jackson. What happened? You're safe now." I think I broke the bond," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "But I had to give up my power, everything." She sat up slowly, looking around the room. "The circle, they're gone." "For now," Jackson replied, exhaustion creeping into his bones. "But they'll be back. I can feel it." Kara took his hand, her grip weak but steady. "We need to leave." They won't stop until they have what they want. Jackson nodded, fear gnawing at him. He had plunged into darkness, and although he had saved Kara, he knew the circle would not forget him. They would come for him again, and next time, they might not be so easy to escape. They packed quickly, gathering what little belongings they could carry. Jackson cast one last look around the apartment, the place that had become a battleground of dark magic and twisted desires. "Let's go," he said, taking Kara's hand and leading her out into the night. But as they stepped outside, a chill washed over them. The shadows seemed to stretch and thicken in the moonlight, swirling around them like living creatures. Jackson felt a wave of dread crash over him, knowing they were far from safe. Jackson and Kara are on the move. Will the circle forget Jackson, or is the circle still watching them? Join our next epic episode to find out.